This week on Defending Jacob, we got to witness firsthand the dangers of leaving quarantine. So, welcome to the channel. If you're new, I'm reviewing the show Defending Jacob on Apple TV+. I've been doing this on a weekly basis, and so far I've really liked the show, and I look forward to reviewing new episodes on a weekly basis. So if you're interested in seeing more videos on this channel, please consider subscribing so you don't miss a thing. So I am going to be going into spoilers, but I'm going to be trying to hit plot points quick, because I feel like not a lot happened this episode, and I'm just going to hit the highlights. So essentially, there were 5 things that stood out to me this episode. Number 5 in importance to me, they had a J.K. Simmons scene, which wasn't a big deal. It was just another little conversation between Andy and Billy. And it has occurred to me that Morten Tyldum, the director of this series, actually directed Counterpart, or the first episode of Counterpart, and maybe a couple other episodes, I believe, that was on Stars, which is a really underrated show if you haven't seen it. And I think it's kind of cool to see that they're kind of reunited here. And I'm glad to see that this wasn't just like a one-episode appearance by J.K. Simmons. It seems like he's going to be showing up a couple more times, even if this is a relatively small role. But I think we'll agree that a little bit of J.K. Simmons goes a long way, which is why he made this list, even though he didn't really do that much this week. Number 4, this was the scene with Elizabeth Vogel, played by Poorna Jagannathan, who I've really enjoyed in this role. And it's interesting because I'm watching The Night Of with my wife right now, and it was interesting just noting the similarities between Defending Jacob and The Night Of. I feel like The Night Of is obviously a superior show. Like, I think that there's just a lot more going on there, and it's actually has things to say and layers of meaning, whereas this is very, very, it's good, but it's a surface level melodrama more so. But it's interesting to see this actress in both shows. And obviously, this episode we found out that Jacob does not have the murder gene, but there are other indications that he lacks empathy, and he has other genes that are associated with violent tendencies. And it became obvious during the conversation with Elizabeth that she very much thinks that Jacob could have done it, and Laurie inferred this. And I think Michelle Dockery is killing it on this show. I'm not saying this just to hate on Chris Evans, but I think this show does not work without him. He's just necessary to this being a successful show. But I feel like he's such a reactive character that he can only really move out of the house when things happen that he can go check out. And he's not really in an investigative role since the first episode. So it's really the reactions that are the most emotional, that are the most authentic, that are going to strike a chord. And I feel like Laurie, played by Michelle Dockery, is much more emotional and much more human than Andy Barber has gotten to be. And I felt like this was a really strong moment for her character when she reacts to the news from Elizabeth Vogel. And I felt like it was probably Michelle Dockery's best scene so far this season. Number 3, Andy faces off with Neil, played by Pablo Schreiber, which, incidentally, I did not know this until recently. He is the half-brother of Liev Schreiber, who many of you may know from Ray Donovan and a lot of other roles. Small world, ain't it? Anyway, so this Neil is being played as just kind of an unrepentant scumbag, which, layers of gray. I don't know how accurate this is. I know that, in real life, I think this is true, that when you encourage people to get convictions as opposed to catch real criminals, then what you'll often see happen is people just laser focus on convicting one person instead of actually convicting the right person. And that seems to be what's going on with Neil. And in his confrontation with Andy could have been a lot smarter for sure. I don't think he needed to react so emotionally, but it was completely understandable why he would react that way. And I pretty much felt like Duffy and the other characters in the scene seemed very understanding of why Andy would want to punch Neil out in that scene. And it was just a good confrontation, and the antagonism between these two characters continues to be one of the more emotionally compelling aspects of the show. Number 2, the reveal that Pats was allegedly watching Ben, which comes from Matt, so I'm a little bit skeptical of it, but it's interesting to see the reaction from the people who have been assuming this whole time that it's Jacob and hearing that maybe they've been ignoring a promising lead. And obviously Andy should not have gotten involved here. And it's hard to say what would have happened if he hadn't, if Matt would have ever come forward, but his involvement is definitely making it more difficult for people to know how seriously to take these leads. I mean, I kind of understand Neil's perspective on this one, that it seems like the witness could be tainted by having met with Andy. But my personal theory is Pat's probably hasn't done anything and that Matt is just angry with him for some reason and is trying to frame him. That's my theory, but I'm not sure. Let me know if you have theories. That's what I'm going with for now. And number one, the most interesting new development this week from my perspective is the mysterious person following Laurie. Now, this felt very Hitchcockian to me, and we didn't get the best look at the person when he was just in the car, and obviously Laurie freaked out and went running, and I thought that was a really tense scene and good for a thriller, and I felt like they didn't overplay it. I feel like they could have made it tonally dissonant by going too far in a thriller direction, because that hasn't really been what this show has been so far. This has been more of a melodrama. But I felt like Michelle Dockery's acting during this scene was really good, and you could just feel how frightening it would be to have a person following you in a situation like this. And this person, their motivation remains completely murky at this point, and they're just kind of another potential red herring, like I think Pat's is ultimately going to turn out to be. But they're definitely someone to watch because they could have a big impact on this story. So those are the 5 things that stood out to me this episode. Obviously, I'm enjoying this show on a weekly basis, but I wish I could just binge it already and get to the end. I tend to think, based on this episode and based on Jacob's reaction when he heard that he didn't have the murder gene and it said, so there's nothing wrong with me. Based on that reaction, I think he did something, but I don't think that he was the one who killed Ben. But that's just what I think so far, and obviously there's a lot of time left, 2 episodes to find out what happens, so I'm really excited to see the last 2 episodes, and I hope you're enjoying it as well. So if you're enjoying these reviews, and if you want to see my upcoming reviews in the coming weeks, please consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, you can watch more videos right now.